Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 7 o'clock main news. In tonight's headlines, His Excellency the Egyptian President leaves Kuwait at the end of a two-day official visit, during which he held talks with His Highness the Emir. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs says Kuwait strongly denounces the terrorist attack against a border post in northern Saudi Arabia. Fighting against the so-called Islamic State militants continues in Kobani region as a suicide blast kills at least 23 troops in the Anbar province. And the US State Department and Palestinian officials condemned the Israeli move of withholding Palestinian tax revenues. His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi of the Arab Republic of Egypt and his accompanying delegation left Kuwait at noon today, ending a two-day official visit to the country, during which he held talks with His Highness the Emir Sheikh Sabah al-Ahmed al-Jabr al-Sabah. He was seen off at the airport by His Highness the Emir, His Highness the Crown Prince Sheikh Nawaf al-Ahmed al-Jabr al-Sabah, His Excellency the National Assembly Speaker Marzouk Ali al-Ghanem, His Excellency the Deputy Chief of the National Guard Sheikh Mish'al al-Ahmed al-Jabr al-Sabah, His Highness Sheikh Jabir al-Mbarak al-Hamad al-Sabah, the Prime Minister, His Excellency the First Deputy Premier and Minister of Foreign Affairs Sheikh Sabah al-Khalid al-Hamad al-Sabah, the Deputy Minister of Emiri Diwan Affairs Sheikh Ali Jarrah al-Sabah, Cabinet members, senior government officials and senior Army, Police and National Guard officers.
ووقائع مغادرة الضيف الكريم دولة الكويت.
His Highness the Emir Sheikh Sabah Al Ahmed Al Jaber Al Sabah received a cable of thanks from His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi of the Arab Republic of Egypt, in which he expressed his deep thanks for the warm welcome and generous hospitality accorded to him during his official visit to the State of Kuwait. President Sisi also highly appreciated the brotherly consultations with His Highness the Emir regarding bilateral issues, Arab and Islamic nations problems, and the regional and international issues of mutual interest. The consultations were dominated by a cordial atmosphere and understanding, which reflected the strength of the ties between the two countries. The Egyptian President concluded his cable by wishing His Highness the Emir all the best of health and the people of Kuwait constant progress and prosperity under His Highness's wise leadership. His Highness the Emir sent a reply cable to His Excellency the Egyptian President, thanking him for his kind feelings and expressed deep pleasure for his visit to the State of Kuwait. His Highness highly valued the outcome of the visit, which reflected the strength of the historic and cordial ties between the two countries and their brotherly peoples, saying that the visit would expand the aspects of cooperation between the two countries in various domains, and wished His Excellency President al-Sisi all the best to achieve glory and development for the Arab Republic of Egypt and its honourable people under his prudent leadership. His Highness the Emir Sheikh Sabah Al Ahmed Al Jaber Al Sabah received this morning at Bayan Palace His Highness the Crown Prince Sheikh Nawaf Al Ahmed Al Jaber Al Sabah. His Highness the Emir also received His Highness Sheikh Nasser Al Mohammed Al Ahmed Al Sabah. His Highness the Emir then received His Highness Sheikh Jaber Al Mubarak Al Hamad Al Sabah, the Prime Minister. Finally, His Highness the Emir received the First Lady Premier and Foreign Minister Sheikh Sabah Al Khalid Al Hamad Al Sabah. His Excellency the President of the Arab Republic of Egypt, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, received this morning at his residence in Bayan Palace the Chairman of the Arab and International Relations Committee, Mohammed Jassim al-Sagr, and board members of the Kuwaiti-Egyptian Relations Council. The meeting was attended by the head of the accompanying mission of honour and advisor at the Emir Diwan, Khalid Youssef Lifley. His Excellency the President of the Arab Republic of Egypt, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, received this morning at his residence in Bayan Palace the Chairman of the Kuwaiti Initiative to Support the Egyptian People, Adel al-Sayr, and board members of the Council. The meeting was attended by the head of the accompanying mission of honour and advisor at the Emir Diwan, Khalid Youssef Lifley. His Highness the Crown Prince Sheikh Nawaf Al Ahmed Al Jaber Al Sabah received this morning at Bayan Palace His Highness Sheikh Nasser Al Mohammed Al Ahmed Al Sabah. His Highness the Crown Prince also received the Chairman of the Central Apparatus for Illegal Residents, Saleh Yusuf Al Fadala. The Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Interior Sheikh Mohammed Khalid Al Hamad Al Sabah took a tour today in which he inspected the preparedness of the security agencies and inaugurated one of the mobile sophisticated security field operation rooms situated at the 6th Ring Road. The Deputy Premier and Minister of Interior asserted during the tour the ministry's determination to upgrade all security sectors in the country and equip them with the advanced tools so that they will be able to carry out their duties in the manner that fulfills their objectives. He also praised the excellent competency and high preparedness of the assigned personnel to handle the technologies of the mobile units. Minister of Information and Minister of State for Youth Affairs Sheikh Salman Sabah Salim Al Sabah held a ceremonial dinner for visiting Egyptian media delegation and local media agencies in preparation of Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's visit to Kuwait. Sheikh Salman Al said the visit would lead to further promotion and expansion of the already strong historical ties between the two countries and welcomed the opportunity for continued growth in a bilateral relationship that spans decades. Badriya Saleh brings us this report.
Minister of Information and Minister of State for Youth Affairs Sheikh Salman Salim Al said Egypt, its president and people are well seated in the hearts of all Kuwaiti people. Speaking to reporters at a press conference and dinner ceremony hosted by the Ministry of Information for the Egyptian media delegation, Sheikh Salman said Egypt has provided welcome support to Kuwait for decades in several development domains, specifically in the scientific, cultural and art realms. He welcomed the visit of Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to Kuwait, hoping it would lead to further promotion and development of historical ties between the two brotherly countries. Sheikh Salman said Kuwait and Egypt have several joint protocols and projects in the field of media and art technical production, pointing to Kuwait's willingness to bolster positive partnership with Arab countries in general. Kuwait and Egypt have had common ties for decades. Thanks to these deep and strong bilateral relations, Kuwait considers Egypt as a major Arab brotherly country, underlining the importance of consolidating and cementing relations between the two countries, as Egypt holds a pivotal and effective role towards the region's issues. The visit of Egyptian President al-Sisi is expected to reaffirm the strength of these bilateral ties to have a positive impact on the interests of both countries. Egyptian-Kuwaiti relations started well before Kuwait's independence. Egypt, in fact, definitively supported Kuwait in its battle for independence, and after Kuwait became independent in 1961, it established diplomatic relations with Egypt, and some Egyptian experts of constitutional law even participated in writing a Kuwaiti constitution in 1961. His Highness the Emir Sheikh Sabah Al-Ahmed Al-Jabr Al-Sabah has been supporting Egypt to help it overcome its obstacles and challenges facing the country since 2011. And under the leadership of His Highness the Emir, Kuwait has been keen on increasing meetings with Egyptian diplomats and officials to discuss issues of common concern and continue to strengthen already strong relations. The dinner was full of camaraderie and was an opportunity for both sides to share and relax before the upcoming meetings of the visit. At the JW Marriott, I'm Badriya Saleh reporting for the English News.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs announced that the State of Kuwait strongly denounced the terrorist attack against one of the border patrols in northern Saudi Arabia yesterday, in which 3 security men fell martyrs and 2 others were wounded. In a statement to the press, the Foreign Under-Secretary Khalid Jarallah said at the National Assembly premises today that Kuwait was firmly standing beside brothers in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, adding that this cowardly terrorist act would not be able to hamper the security of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia or affect the security of any member state in the Gulf Cooperation Council. Explosions and smoke were seen in the embattled northern Syrian town of Kobani today as fighting between the so-called Islamic State militants and Kurdish fighters continued. According to sources, Kurdish fighters with the support of the Iraqi Peshmerga forces and the US-led coalition advanced in Kobani, capturing a vital zone housing government buildings after heavy fighting with the militants. Meanwhile, a suicide blast targeted Iraqi security forces and subsequent clashes with IS militants today killed at least 23 troops and pro-government fighters in the Iraqi western province of Anbar. Officials said the clashes also left at least 28 people wounded. In the meantime, the IS group announced the killing of 8 men in Salahuddin province north of Baghdad for allegedly cooperating with government forces and airstrikes by the US-led coalition targeting the militant group. Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi called for a tribal revolution against the so-called Islamic State group, emphasizing the importance of the tribes in taking part in liberating their areas from the terrorist organization. In a meeting with the newly elected governor of the embattled Anbar province, Suhaib Barawi, al-Abadi stressed the need for a tribal revolution to rid the body of Iraqi society of what he called the foreign enemy. Meanwhile, Iraqi Defense Minister Haider al-Abadi said that the Iraqi military has started rebuilding after its near-total collapse last summer, but that the effort is still in its initial phase. Haider al-Abadi sacked several dozen commanders and told al-Abadi to lead a probe into corruption within the Iraqi military after the IS seized large territory from Iraqi security forces last summer. Since then, the hardline militants have been pushed out of several districts around Baghdad and near the Iranian border. The decision by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to order the withholding of Palestinian tax revenues in response to the application of the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas to join the International Criminal Court has been sharply criticized by Israel's President and the United States, as well as senior Palestinian figures. The U.S. State Department was critical of the move and issued a statement condemning the decision to freeze the transfer of more than $100 million in tax revenues, as it would just raise tensions. Israel's move was also denounced in a strongly worded letter to the UN Security Council by the Palestinian ambassador to the UN, Riyad Mansour, who described it as a blatant theft and an act of collective punishment. Meanwhile, the Israeli President Reuven Rivlin also denounced the move at a closed-door meeting with Israeli ambassadors. Tunisia's largest political party chose former Interior Minister Habib Essid as its candidate for Prime Minister and asked him to begin work immediately on forming a coalition government. He joins other former officials making a comeback through the ballot box since October's parliamentary election and December's presidential runoff that marked the final steps to full democracy. Essid was asked by the newly elected President Beji Caid Essebsi to form a coalition and name a cabinet over the next month. Tunisia completed its political transition with a string of elections in 2014, with the most votes going to Nida Tunis, a party that includes many members of the old regime and has promised stability after a transition marked by unrest. 2 more bodies from the crashed AirAsia plane were recovered today, bringing the number of bodies found to 39. Strong currents forced Indonesia to expand the search area as rough seas and bad weather moved debris and made it difficult to reach suspected chunks of the fuselage on the ocean's floor. A team comprising of the Indonesian Search and Rescue Agency and the Indonesian military force, assisted by the United States, Korea, Japan, Malaysia, Singapore and Russia, is carrying out the search and recovery operation. Meanwhile, Indonesian authorities imposed the first punishment stemming from the plane crash by suspending officials connected to the airline's alleged flight schedule violation. Officials said that Indonesia AirAsia flight was not authorized to fly on Sundays, as it did when it went down in the Java Sea en route to Singapore from Surabaya, Indonesia. Supporters of a Kashmiri separatist leader clashed with police today in Srinagar, the capital of the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir. The fighting erupted as the leader of the Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front, Mohammed Yasin Malik, and his supporters proceeded with a hunger strike against the arrest of separatists in the run-up to the 5-phased assembly election. Meanwhile, sources said that about 6,000 civilians fled from their homes overnight as fighting moved to civilian areas, and at least 10 Indian and Pakistani soldiers and civilians have been killed in fighting over the past week. The violence came days before U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is due to visit India, while U.S. President Barack Obama is also due to visit India later this month. Lawmakers in Pakistan have passed legislation for military courts to try insurgents, one of a series of measures aimed at clamping down on increasingly brutal attacks after Taliban gunmen massacred 132 children last month. The bill, which is now expected to be passed by the upper house and signed into law by the president this week, secured the unanimous vote of 242 lawmakers present, 14 more than the 2/3 majority it required. Some politicians have raised concerns about the dramatic expansion of military powers in the country. Most of them agree that military courts must be used to curb Taliban attacks because civilian courts are too coward and corrupt to jail militants. Meanwhile, Pakistani Interior Minister Chaudhry Nisar Ali Khan said last week that the courts will have a limited mandate. Candidates for the Sri Lanka presidential elections were on their last stretch of campaigning ahead of the January 8th polls. Sri Lankan President Mahinda Rajapaksa, seeking a third term in Thursday's election, is facing an unexpected and powerful challenge from one of his former aides. When he called the election 2 years ahead of schedule, Rajapaksa was expected to cruise to an easy victory. However, an internal revolt led by his former health minister in the ruling Freedom Party, Maithripala Sirisena, has seen more than 20 lawmakers and former ministers cross over from the president's side to his rival. The rival United National Party and parties representing ethnic minorities also have thrown their support to Sirisena, saying that Rajapaksa had made few efforts to heal the wounds of the civil war in the country. And in local financial news, the main price indices of the Kuwait Stock Exchange ended today's trading session with a negative performance as the price index dropped by 99 points to reach 6,397 points. The KSX 15 index, however, lost 15 points and settled at the level of 1,037 points. The share of the IFA Hotels and Resorts Company was the top gainer of the day, while that of the Pearl of Kuwait Real Estate Company suffered the biggest loss. For a chance to see our reports again, please visit our YouTube channel at MOI Kuwait News. And to recap tonight's news, here are the headlines once again. His Excellency the Egyptian President leaves Kuwait at the end of a 2-day official visit, during which he held talks with His Highness the Emir. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs says Kuwait strongly denounces that terrorist attack against a border post in northern Saudi Arabia. Fighting against the so-called Islamic State militants continues in Kobani region as a suicide blast killed at least 23 troops in the Anbar province. And the US State Department and Palestinian officials condemned the Israeli move of withholding Palestinian tax revenues. Thank you for joining us.